The human skeleton is not meant to be found in a place of shelter. It is a final testament to exposure, a surrender to the elements. Yet on a crisp autumn day in 2025, two sets of human remains were discovered inside a place built to defy the wilderness. A long-forgotten cabin swallowed by the dense forests of the Rocky Mountains. The discovery would finally answer a question that had echoed through these valleys for 35 years. What happened to William and Michael Clark? Two brothers who walked into the woods for a simple camping trip in the summer of 1990 and simply vanished from the face of the earth. William Clark was 24 years old, the elder brother by 3 years. He was the planner, the steady hand, the one who carried the map and checked the compass. He had a quiet confidence that made others feel safe, a quality that had just earned him a promotion at the engineering firm where he worked in Denver. His younger brother, Michael, was 21, a stark but complementary contrast. Michael was the artist, the dreamer, a university student who saw the world through the lens of a camera and the boundless potential of a blank page. They were inseparable, bound by the easy camaraderie of siblings who were also genuine friends. Their plan for that August in 1990 was utterly unremarkable, the kind of adventure thousands of people embark on every year. They intended to spend a week in the Uncompahgre National Forest, a sprawling expanse of rugged peaks, deep canyons, and pristine alpine lakes. It was not a quest to conquer a formidable summit or navigate a dangerous river. It was a simple retreat from the city, a chance to breathe clean air, fish for trout, and sleep under a canopy of stars. They were experienced campers, but by no means expert mountaineers, just two ordinary young men looking for a brief and peaceful escape. On the morning of August 12th, they spoke with their mother one last time. From a payphone in a small town at the edge of the forest, William assured her they had all the necessary supplies and that their planned route was a well-established, moderately difficult loop trail. He said they would be out of the woods and heading home by the following Sunday, August 19th. Michael got on the line for a moment, his voice full of excitement, telling his mother he hoped to get some incredible photographs of the Perseid meteor shower. That was the last time their family would ever hear their voices. The Rocky Mountains are a place of profound and intimidating beauty. The landscape is a canvas of immense scale, where granite peaks tear at the sky and forests of pine and aspen stretch for hundreds of square miles, unbroken by roads or civilization. It is a geography that is both alluring and utterly indifferent to human presence. To venture into its depths is to accept a certain vulnerability, to acknowledge that you are a temporary guest in a realm governed by its own ancient and unforgiving rules. It was into this vast and silent wilderness that the Clark brothers drove their modest sedan, parked it at the designated trailhead, and took their first steps onto a path that would lead them into a 35-year mystery. Sunday, August 19th, came and went. The Clark family waited, a knot of anxiety tightening with each passing hour. At first, they reasoned away the delay. Perhaps the brothers were having such a good time, they decided to stay an extra day. Maybe they miscalculated the hiking time, or a minor, non-urgent issue had held them up. But as Sunday bled into Monday, and Monday afternoon faded into evening, the plausible excuses evaporated, leaving only the cold, hard stone of fear. Their father contacted the Gunnison County Sheriff's Department late that night, officially reporting his two sons as missing. The initial search operation began at dawn the next morning. It was a textbook response, executed with professional urgency. Sheriff's deputies and park rangers were dispatched to the trailhead, where they quickly located the brothers' locked sedan. A coordinated search grid was established. and ground crews began the painstaking process of sweeping the trail system. The scale of the environment was the immediate and most daunting challenge. The brothers' intended route covered nearly 40 miles of varied terrain, but they could have strayed from that path at any point, opening up thousands of square miles of dense forest, treacherous ravines, and rocky slopes as potential search areas. Within 2 days, the operation had escalated significantly. Seasoned volunteer search and rescue teams from across Colorado joined the effort, bringing with them trained canine units capable of detecting human scent over long distances. A helicopter from the State Patrol was brought in, its rotors beating a rhythmic, hopeful pulse against the vast mountain silence. From the air, the immense wilderness revealed its true, intimidating scale. The dense canopy of trees made spotting anything on the forest floor nearly impossible. The searchers on the ground moved slowly, shoulder to shoulder in long lines, their eyes scanning for any sign of the missing men. A piece of discarded gear, a footprint, a shred of brightly colored fabric. Days of exhaustive searching turned up nothing. The initial theories were logical and predictable. The most probable scenario was that one of the brothers had suffered an injury, like a broken leg from a fall, and the other had stayed with him. But if that were the case, they should have been found near the trail. Another possibility was a sudden and severe weather event, a common occurrence in the Rockies, but no significant storms had been reported in that specific area during the week they were missing. An encounter with wildlife, such as a bear or a mountain lion, was also considered, but these incidents were exceedingly rare and would almost certainly have left behind obvious and grisly evidence. Then, on the 5th day of the search, came the first major discovery. A ground team, venturing a few hundred yards off the main trail to investigate a small clearing, found the brothers' campsite. The discovery was both a breakthrough and a profound source of confusion. The large, high-quality tent was fully erect. Inside 2 sleeping bags were unrolled, and their spare clothes were neatly folded. Outside, their portable stove, cookware, and leftover food supplies were tidily arranged near the fire pit. It was a scene of peaceful, domestic routine, not one of chaos or emergency. The presence of their main camp gear immediately debunked the theory that they had simply gotten lost while hiking the loop. All of their overnight equipment was here. Their wallets, identification, and car keys were zipped into a pouch inside the tent. Investigators concluded that the brothers had likely set up this base camp and then embarked on a shorter day hike, intending to return before nightfall. They would have carried only small day packs with water, snacks, and perhaps a camera. But why had they not returned? And where could they have gone? The discovery of the campsite re-energized the search, focusing all efforts in a 5-mile radius around the tent. Searchers combed every gully, every thicket, every rock outcropping. The canine units were brought back to the tent to acquire a fresh scent. But the trails they followed would inevitably go cold after a few hundred yards, dissolving into the confusing tapestry of smells that made up the forest floor. The hope that had surged with the campsite's discovery began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The scene was too clean, too orderly. It was as if William and Michael Clark had been standing there one moment and had simply been plucked from the earth the next. After 2 full weeks of intense round-the-clock searching, the official operation was scaled back. The professional teams returned to their jurisdictions, and the volunteers went back to their lives, haunted by the mystery they had failed to solve. The Clark family organized their own private searches for months afterward, but the vastness of the mountains swallowed their desperate efforts. The case grew cold. The file, filled with maps, reports, and unanswered questions, was placed in a cabinet at the sheriff's office. William and Michael Clark were now specters, their names forever attached to a patch of wilderness that held its secrets tight. Years passed. The vibrant memory of the two young men began to fade for the public, replaced by a somber local legend. The story of the missing Clark brothers became a cautionary tale told to new hikers, a reminder of the mountain's power to claim the unwary. For their parents, however, time offered no such distance. They lived in a perpetual state of limbo, unable to mourn, unable to move on. Every few years, a new sheriff or a curious journalist would reopen the file, but no new leads ever emerged. 8 years passed, then 15. The world moved on. Technology evolved, but the forest where the brothers were last seen remained unchanged, a timeless monument to their disappearance. By 2025, the case was a fossil. It was a relic from a different era of law enforcement, a time before DNA databases and ubiquitous GPS. The original investigators were long retired or had passed away. The brothers' parents were now elderly, their hope for answers worn down to a fragile, translucent sliver. The mystery of what happened in the Uncompahgre National Forest in 1990 seemed destined to remain unsolved forever. Another one of the countless stories of people who walked into the great American wilderness and were never seen again. The solution to the mystery would not come from a detective's clever insight or a long-forgotten clue. It would come, as resolutions to cold cases so often do, entirely by chance. In October of 2025, a pair of cartographers from the United States Forest Service were conducting a survey deep in a remote section of the forest, miles from any marked trail or road. They were using advanced LiDAR equipment, a laser-based mapping technology that could penetrate the dense tree canopy and create a detailed topographical image of the ground below. Their task was to identify and catalog undocumented historical structures, such as old mining claims or homesteads, for preservation purposes. While analyzing the data from a densely wooded basin, they noticed a small, perfectly rectangular anomaly that the system had flagged. It was the unmistakable signature of a man-made structure, one that appeared on no existing maps. The next day, guided by their GPS coordinates, they hiked into the area to investigate. After hours of difficult bushwhacking, they found it. Tucked into a hillside, almost completely obscured by overgrown aspens and a collapsed porch roof, was a small, dilapidated log cabin. It was an old trapper's or line rider's cabin, likely abandoned for more than half a century. It had an air of profound isolation, a place that time had forgotten. The door was swollen shut in its frame, but the wood was rotten. With a hard shove, it splintered and gave way, opening into a dark, musty interior. As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, they saw a scene of utter stillness and decay. A thick blanket of dust and rodent droppings covered everything. There was a rusted wood-burning stove, a collapsed cot, and a single wooden chair, and sitting in that chair, and lying on the floor beside it, were 2 human skeletons. The scene was shockingly serene and deeply unsettling. The remains were fully articulated, bleached white by time, undisturbed for what must have been decades. One skeleton was seated upright in the chair, its skull tilted slightly as if in contemplation. The other lay on its side on the dirt floor, curled in what might have been a sleeping position. This was not a place where 2 hikers had accidentally taken shelter from a storm. This was a tomb. The Gunnison County Sheriff's Department was notified immediately. A team of investigators and forensic specialists made the arduous journey to the hidden cabin, establishing a perimeter and treating the entire area as a crime scene. The remote location and the passage of time had perfectly preserved the scene, creating a grim time capsule. Every item in the cabin was meticulously documented and collected. The skeletons were carefully excavated by a forensic anthropologist who noted the complete lack of any associated clothing or equipment. There were no boots, no jackets, no day packs. There was nothing to suggest who these individuals were or how they had arrived at this desolate spot. The remains were transported to the state medical examiner's office, where the real work of identification began. Dental records are a powerful tool, and the cold case file for the Clark brothers, preserved for 35 years, contained their complete dental charts. Within days, the forensic odontologist made a positive match. The skeletons found in the forgotten cabin belonged to William and Michael Clark. After 3.5 decades of silence, they had finally been found. The discovery brought a painful, bittersweet relief to their elderly parents, but it also opened up a host of terrifying new questions. How did they end up in that cabin, and why did they die there? The initial assumption was that the brothers had gotten hopelessly lost, stumbled upon the cabin, and succumbed to starvation or exposure. It was a tragic but plausible scenario. That theory, however, was systematically dismantled by the forensic anthropologist's final report. A detailed examination of the bones revealed the true violent nature of their deaths. William, the skeleton found in the chair, had a small circular fracture on his left temple, a telltale sign of a ballistic impact from a small caliber firearm. Michael's remains showed something equally sinister. His hyoid bone, a small U-shaped bone in the neck, was fractured. It is a bone that is almost never broken by accident. A fractured hyoid is the classic, unambiguous signature of manual strangulation. It was impossible. They had been murdered. The case was no longer a missing persons investigation. It was a 35-year-old double homicide. The cabin was no longer a shelter. It was a clandestine grave. Detectives now faced the monumental task of solving a murder with no witnesses, no obvious suspects, and a crime scene where the trail had gone ice-cold more than 3 decades ago. They started with the one solid piece of evidence they had, the cabin itself. They scoured property records from the late 1980s, searching for the owner of the tract of land where the structure stood. The search was tedious, involving dusty, archived paper records from a pre-digital era, but eventually they found a name. The land, a large, isolated parcel that bordered the national forest, had been owned by a man named Silas Croft. A check of current records showed that he still owned a piece of property nearby, a small, ramshackle house at the end of a long dirt road. He was 87 years old and had lived in the area his entire life. Old law enforcement records painted a picture of a reclusive and cantankerous man. He had a history of disputes with his neighbors, and several old complaints had been filed against him for aggressively confronting hikers or hunters he perceived as trespassers on his land. He was a loner, a man who kept to himself and harbored a deep distrust of outsiders. 2 detectives drove out to Croft's property. They found him outside, a stooped, white-haired man with pale, watchful eyes. His property was cluttered and dilapidated, frozen in time. When they asked him about the old cabin, he became defensive and evasive, claiming he barely remembered it and had not been there in 40 years. His answers were clipped, his demeanor hostile. The detectives left, But their instincts told them they had found their man. They secured a search warrant for his house, and the next morning, a team of officers returned. The search of Silas Croft's home was like an archaeological dig into a troubled mind. The house was packed with decades of accumulated junk. But amidst the squalor, they found the trophies. Tucked away in a dusty wooden box in the back of a closet was a vintage 35mm camera. It was the exact make and model that Michael Clark had owned. Inside a separate drawer, they found a worn leather wallet containing the university identification card of Michael Clark. And finally, the most damning piece of evidence: a hand-drawn map, yellowed with age, showing the exact location of the brothers' campsite and a crudely marked path leading to the hidden cabin, which Croft had labeled simply as the quiet place. Now, presented with the evidence, Silas Croft's decades of silence finally broke. In a long, rambling confession, delivered in a cold, monotone voice at the sheriff's department, he laid out the events of that August day in 1990. He said he had been out walking his property line when he came across the Clark brothers' camp. In his paranoid and possessive mind, their mere presence was a profound violation. He saw them not as two young men enjoying the wilderness, but as intruders, invaders from the city who were disrespecting his land, even though their camp was technically on public Forest Service property. He told the detectives he had confronted them, armed with a small-caliber rifle he always carried. An argument had started over nothing, a perceived slight, a look he did not like. His simmering resentment boiled over into a cold rage. He forced the two terrified brothers at gunpoint to march for miles through the dense woods to his secret, abandoned cabin. What happened next, he relayed with a chilling lack of emotion. He said he had made them sit there for hours while he decided what to do. The motive was not robbery. It was a terrifying expression of power and control. He ultimately decided they could not be allowed to leave. They had seen his face. They knew where his land was. In his twisted logic, he had to eliminate the threat. He shot William first, as he sat in the chair. Then he turned on Michael and strangled him. He took their day packs and their camera as mementos, and then walked away, leaving them in the silent cabin, confident his secret would be safe forever. The trial of Silas Croft was a quiet, somber affair. The evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite his advanced age, the judge delivered the only sentence possible for a crime of such calculated and senseless cruelty. Silas Croft was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, without the possibility of parole. He would die in a state penitentiary, a bitter and hateful old man, the final keeper of a secret he had guarded for more than half a lifetime. The story of William and Michael Clark is a tragedy defined not by the wilderness they chose to explore, but by the hidden monster they unknowingly encountered within it. For 35 years, their family and friends were left to imagine 1,000 different scenarios: a fall, an animal, a sudden storm. The truth in the end was both simpler and infinitely more disturbing. They were lost not to the grand, indifferent forces of nature, but to the petty, paranoid, and profoundly banal evil of a single man. Their final resting place was not a remote, beautiful mountainside, but a dark, dusty room, victims of a senseless act of violence that stole their futures and left behind only a silence that would take a generation to finally be broken.